It's that time of year again. The end of it, that is. And y'all know what that means. It's time for me to lock myself in a bunker for a week and spend every waking moment going slightly mad and watching every one of the hundreds of anime openings that came out this year. The competition was stiff this year. Over 70 OPs were good enough to deserve consideration on the final shortlist of nominees, before whittling them down to this final top 10. And I had to make a lot of very hard cuts along the way. 2017 was definitely a strong year with stiff competition. Some openings that I absolutely love didn't quite make the cut, and a few shows that I didn't expect much of managed to really surprise me. With even mainstream anime making bold, out-there choices with their openings, this year's list was really anyone's game. If you haven't seen my previous OP lists, they're a little different from your regular top 10s. To ensure I don't just pick a bunch of samey OPs that happen to appeal to my very specific personal tastes, I've broken all of the year's OPs into categories and picked the best OP in each one. Then I ranked those winners against each other to determine the order of the final list. Now, without further ado, let's get to these rankings. In 10th place, we're talking about OPs that aim to thrill. Intros that aren't necessarily action-packed per se, but that get your pulse and mind racing with exciting direction. OPs where techniques typically used to enhance action, like rapid camera movement and fast cuts, are applied to different subject matter. Sometimes you see these kind of openings in front of action anime that want to create an unconventional vibe, like Juni Taizen with its heavy use of Matrix slow-mo. More often, they come in front of less conventional sports shows, like Welcome to the Ballroom and Kabukibu, or thriller anime like Evil or Live, which has a surprisingly good OP for a Howliners series. And in a similar vein, Chaos Child had a surprisingly brilliant opening with some really inventive title integration. In the West, spy thrillers like James Bond have been carrying the torch of creative title sequences for over half a decade, so maybe it's fitting that our winner in this category is also a tale of international intrigue. And no, I'm not talking about Princess Principal, although that opening is brilliant in its own right, and if I rank these based on music, it would definitely be close to the top of my list. But even with those criteria, Shadow and Truth from Aka 13ku Kanatsuka would rank even higher, and in terms of the direction and shot composition accompanying that music, it's really no contest. Aka is one of those unique, hard-to-classify anime that gets promptly buried and forgotten under the mountain of samey popular stuff that comes out every season. And that's a shame, because while its tale of bureaucratic intrigue and political maneuvering is pretty dry and a hard sell, it's a very compelling watch once you get into it. The OP definitely tries its hardest to make the show's appeal obvious, with slick editing and some absolutely incredible motion graphics. For the most part, the animation isn't all that impressive in execution. Most of the characters only move through motion tweens if they move at all, rather than actual redrawn frames, but the imagery is so brilliantly conceived that it doesn't really bother me. The most immediately striking thing about this OP is its use of color, limiting the palette of each image to emphasize specific emotions and draining the color from the screen entirely when things get serious. The transition from funky upbeat hip-hop and candy-coated imagery at the beginning to darker, sexier vocals and more dramatic shots towards the end neatly mirrors the escalation of the plot in the show itself. And looking past the broad strokes, you see some pretty brilliant small details too. I particularly love the image of a small drop of water splashing into the shape of a crown, suggesting that seemingly insignificant actions will be what shapes the fate of Aka's entire bird-shaped nation. The OP also incorporates imagery from all of the episodic plots that gradually build up into this grander political mystery, capturing the flavor of each self-contained story while showing how they all fit into the greater whole. This intro is cool and fun and sexy, not unlike the classic James Bond title sequences from which it draws heavy inspiration. But even if we were ranking these on pure sex appeal, it would still come in after our next entry. In 9th place, we're celebrating fan service openings, intros that emphasize the cuteness, moe, or hotness, ecchi, of a show's cast and use it as a primary selling point. Now, where we draw the line on what qualifies as a fan service OP can be a bit murky, since almost all anime have cute girls, or guys depending on who they're going for, and most of them use those characters in marketing to one degree or another. And any good fan service OP is going to focus on things beyond character appeal as well. So my rule of thumb is that if there's more than one shot that focuses on a character's anatomy, like this ass shot of unparalleled quality from Frame Arms Girl, or if they turn to the camera and do something for no other purpose than being adorable, it's a fan service OP, even if it also has cool action scenes or other qualities to recommend it. On the ecchi side of the spectrum, Schoolgirl Strikers and UQ Holder stood out as excellent this year. And as for Moe, Demi-chan wa Kataritai and Eromanga Sensei both really brought it with fun, bouncy, creative visuals. And if you prefer hot guys, well, the free knockoff Dive certainly has you covered in that respect and feels pretty epic to boot. This category ultimately comes down to two very strong contenders though. Saikano Flats OP manages to be surprisingly moving and visually arresting with its screen wipe gimmick, its floating titles, and its emphasis on the emotional arcs of its cast of adorable girls, not to mention its softer art style. It almost feels like the title sequence for an indie film. But while that opening is beautiful, it falls just a bit short of the tight, multi-layered direction and shot composition of our winner, Morning Glory from Sakura Quest. Aside from the fun presentation of its title, this OP doesn't really make use of any crazy stylistic flourishes or motion graphics. Its appeal comes down entirely to the way the action is staged and animated, and how it all syncs up perfectly with No Name's infectious theme song. The OP follows series protagonist Ayaka Nanase as she goes about her daily duties as the queen of Manoyama Village, and from the moment she finally falls out of bed 25 seconds in, #relatable, we see her in almost constant motion, stopping only for breakfast and a brief stretch at her desk as she runs around, getting lost on country roads, moving around boxes, sweeping up, and making royal declarations. Every tiny motion syncs up with the music in one way or another, creating a sense of rhythmic chaos, a purposeful scramble to get everything done that needs to be done before it needs to be done. A lot of emphasis is put on how Nanase's friends support her and make it possible for her to work at this pace, and it all wraps up with a nice, quiet moment as she finishes her bookkeeping for the night and gets ready for the next day. Director Soichi Masui has a real eye for composition. Every shot is perfectly balanced, with space carved out for the subtle pink credits to fit into that balance without being strictly necessary for it. But beyond that simple visual appeal, there's just so much going on in every shot. Nanase alone is incredibly expressive and adorable, but we see this especially with the group compositions. Each character acts on their own motivations, and multiple mini-stories can play out within a single frame. The cafe shot in particular is impressive for its sheer density, but the tracking shots are equally remarkable for all of the tiny little details that the camera pans over. This little town and all of the characters living in it are just brimming with personality in every frame. It's basically impossible to watch this OP without smiling, and though it may not be as flashy as some of the other OPs on this list, it has the fundamentals of good filmmaking down better than most. That said, if you're looking for flash, our 8th place winner has that in spades. Next up, we're looking at the kind of OP that I like to call a Sakuga showcase. Openings that wow us with remarkable animation, be it traditional hand-drawn work like Little Witch Academia, or impressive CGI like we see in Inuyashiki and Land of the Lustrous. Sangatsu no Lion very nearly claimed this spot with the heart-wrenching exploration of depression that kicks off each of its episodes. It's an undeniably beautiful opening with jaw-dropping character animations and stunningly detailed background art, as well as some striking stylistic shifts, but in terms of raw animation quality, nothing this year comes even close to touching After the Rain, the OP of Adam the Beginning. If you're not aware, and I wouldn't blame you if you aren't since it was an Amazon exclusive, Adam the Beginning is a prequel to Astro Boy that focuses on future doctors Tenma and Ochanomizu as they develop their first robot in their college years. But equal credit for bringing their creation to life should go to OP director Bahi JD and his team of animators for, well, I mean, just look at this. Every motion is so remarkably lifelike. Every character moves with their own distinctive personality and body language. So much in every shot moves in general, including nondescript randoms in the crowd scenes, and even some of the hand-drawn backgrounds themselves. It's insane. Like, just look at this shot of everyone sitting at a diner. All 4 of these characters are doing their own thing, and each one is animated better than something you'd see in a close-up in most other shows. The elasticity of the croquet pawn that Tenma is eating is so realistic that it's actually kind of scary. That shot, by the way, was handled by a Western animator, Jonathan Job Nkondo, I really hope I'm pronouncing that right, whose portfolio of work online is all equally impressive. But that's far from the only place that you see this kind of attention to detail. Look at how the tide is affected by A106's punch in this scene. And if you freeze frame in the next shot, you can see that they bothered to draw actual facial features on the guy driving this car that you see for all of 4 frames. You can tell that the animators were allowed to go absolutely hog wild in creating this intro, particularly with the vibrant, explosive action scenes that punctuate the second half. In terms of storyboarding and editing, a few other shows impress a bit more. Obviously, this is pretty low on the list, but again, when it comes to animation in particular, basically nothing else this year comes close. Moving on to 7th place, here we're looking at openings that are just fun, you know? OPs that use catchy, poppy music and lively animation to put an indelible smile on your face. And we are spoiled for choice this year, with great offerings from comedies like Mahojin Guru Guru, Osamatsu-san, and especially anime Gataris, as well as slightly more serious fare like Alice and Zoroku, Sugumomo, and Isekai Shokudo. But while all of these shows made impressive efforts, the winner in this category was locked in right at the start of the year. I mean, with its surreal visuals, hilarious gags, and stupidly infectious theme song from god-tier J-pop group Fana, how could I not pick Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid as the winner in this category? By picking Tomorrow from Konosuba 2 instead. That's how. It was a very close competition between those 2 OPs, but while Konosuba's visuals might not be as out there and psychedelic as those of Maid Dragon, the fact that they come together into a coherent story as opposed to a bunch of beautiful but ultimately random vignettes is a bit more impressive to me. And ultimately, while both openings made me smile, Konosuba's just made me smile that a little bit harder. I already analyzed this OP in depth at the start of the year, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much here. Aside from telling a story, which very few OPs even try to do, there's a lot that makes this one stand out from the rest. The jokes, for starters. There's literally a laugh to be had every 10 seconds here, which both makes this OP endlessly entertaining in its own right, and makes it a perfect advertisement for the similarly hilarious show. They even make a gag out of the overused running in the OP cliche. And of course, the new theme song by Machiko is just as fantastic as the last one, whether you listen to it in the original tempo or the official unplugged version, a mellow acoustic remix that was included on the single CD. But the real standout feature of this OP is the animation, and it stands out for pretty much the exact opposite reason that Adam the Beginning does. Unrestrained by any need to make the characters look pretty or cool or to even keep them on model, the animators of this OP were able to go absolutely nuts with the slapstick comedy and especially the expressions, and the results speak for themselves. I challenge you to look at the party's exasperated faces after running, or Kazuma's terrified expression as he falls, or even this stupid thumbs up and not at least crack a smile. It's ugly, it's stupid, and it's absolutely hilarious. There's a ton going on in almost every shot as well, but if you want to hear more about that, you can check out my What's in an OP covering this intro. Next up, we're looking at openings that have fun in a different way, namely through their music. Character song OPs, as the name suggests, OPs with themes sung and written in the voices of a show's characters, can be a fun way of introducing audiences to an anime's cast and plot, as well as making the OP feel like a more cohesive part of the overall story. There's a lot of potential in this style of opening, and a lot of shows tried to exploit that potential this year. I found 18 character songs worthy of inclusion on my shortlist alone, almost twice as many as any other category, so so I decided to split them into two, which we'll be covering in the next two slots. In 6th place, we're honoring the serious side of character openings. OPs that give us a look at the earnest feelings of the characters singing them. Naturally, a lot of these come in front of idol shows like Bang Dream, Idol Jihen, Idol Master Side M, and of course Love Live Sunshine 2, the latest entry in the series that set the standard for this kind of OP. And those are just the good idol OPs from this year. There are a lot of them. But we see this in other kinds of shows as well. Urahara, for instance, where the OP is literally the best part of the whole series. The Monogatari series is famous for this, having each girl sing their own unique OP for every arc that they star in, sometimes having 3 or 4 in a single season. This year alone, WAAAAY Monogatari Season 2 gave us Terminal Terminal for the Mayoi Hell arc, Dreamy Date Drive for the Hitagi Rendezvous arc, which is basically just a minute of Senjo Gahara looking hot, not that I'm complaining, and Dark Cherry Mystery for the Ogi Dark arc, which is the most visually inventive of the 3 and my personal favorite. And while Monogatari is an old hand at this, it was equaled this year by Made in Abyss, which features Reg and Riko singing a happy, upbeat song about their irresistible urge to descend into the depths of the show's titular Lovecraftian horror pit, even if it costs them their sanity or eventually their lives. But even above all of those, Ugoku from Girls' Last Tour stands out as one of the most visually inventive OPs of the year, and it manages to perfectly encapsulate the melancholic themes and tone of the show it's attached to. Girls' Last Tour offers a surprisingly calm, hopeful, and philosophical take on the post-apocalypse, and that's of course reflected in the lyrics of this theme, in which Chito and Yuri sing about keeping each other company when the world around them is cold and lonely, and always moving forward with hope even when everything seems bleak. The visuals, too, capture this optimistic outlook, creating a surreal, cartoony interpretation of the girls' icy, ruined surroundings. I never thought I'd see a post-apocalyptic setting that looks simultaneously inviting and cold, but this OP somehow manages to strike that balance. From the animation, you get a strong impression of the girls' affection for one another and how they support each other in this harsh world. And that optimism I was talking about before definitely comes through in the increasingly goofy dance moves they perform over the chorus. I'll make no apologies for it, this cute little dab was absolutely the deciding factor that pushed this OP over the top for me. Girls' Last Tour's OP has elements of fun to it, the girls are straight up adorable, but it's not all sugar and rainbows. The music has a slow, pensive tone compared to the upbeat, chirpy J-pop you hear in most OPs. None of these precarious structures look particularly safe, and the muted color palette and film grain effect are a constant, subtle reminder that all of this fun is being had in a rough, long-faded world, which is kind of ideal for a surreal show about finding beauty in desolation. This is a striking, unique, quirky opening that tells you exactly what the show is offering and hooks you on that promise. In 5th place, we're going to be acknowledging the funny side of character songs, but you're going to have to wait a few days for that because this list ended up being a bit longer than I expected it to when I started writing it, so we're going to have to do that thing where we split the video into a 2-parter. While you're waiting, let me know in the comments below what you thought of the first half of this list and what you think will win the top honors. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe so you actually see part 2 when it comes out on, let's say Tuesday, so you guys have time to get over your New Year's hangovers and properly enjoy it. Part 2 of this list will be available for you to click on right here when it goes up, but I'll put a placeholder there for now, and if you just can't wait for more Mother's Basement, then click here right now to check out my list of the best Madhouse OPs. Until the new year, I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.